I stood on my own front porch, luggage at my feet, staring in disbelief at the shiny new deadbolt where my familiar lock had been. Through the curtains, I could see Amanda, my daughter-in-law, watching me. When our eyes met, she quickly stepped back. I tried my key again, jiggling it uselessly, then pounded on the door. Nothing. I called my son David for the 5th time, straight to voicemail. The weight of 40 years in this house pressed against my chest as Mrs. Peterson from next door slowed her car, watching curiously. In that moment, standing locked out of my own home, I made a decision. This betrayal would not stand. This house on Maple Street had been my anchor through every storm life threw at me. My parents left it to me when they passed, and I raised both my boys here as a young mother. Every nail in the wall, every creaky floorboard told our family story. After Harold died 5 years ago, I was determined to stay independent. The memories we created together lived in these walls. I had no intention of leaving. When David brought Amanda home 3 years ago, I was genuinely happy for him. At 42, he had been through a painful divorce and spent years focused solely on his career in software development. Amanda was pretty, 15 years younger, and had an energetic personality that seemed to breathe new life into my son. Their wedding was small but lovely, and I welcomed her warmly into our family. Then came the tech industry layoffs last year. David was caught in the second wave of cuts at his company. With their savings already stretched thin from buying new furniture and taking an expensive honeymoon, they quickly found themselves in financial trouble. Their apartment lease was ending, and rental prices in our area had skyrocketed. When I suggested they move in with me temporarily to get back on their feet, it seemed like the perfect solution. My 4-bedroom house had plenty of space, and I thought having family around would be good for all of us. The first few weeks went smoothly. Amanda brought fresh energy to the house, and David seemed relieved to have the financial pressure eased. But small things began to change. I would come downstairs to find my kitchen completely reorganized. Appliances I had kept in certain places for decades were now arranged by what Amanda called efficiency logic. "Sonia," she would say with that tight smile of hers, "nobody puts the coffee maker next to the refrigerator anymore. It makes much more sense by the sink where the water is." She was always making little comments about my routines, too. When I did laundry on Mondays, as I had for 40 years, she would say, "You know, energy rates are lower on weekends. We should adjust the schedule." "We," I noticed. "Not you. We." Slowly, these small irritations grew into actual conflicts. Amanda complained about the potpourri I kept in the living room because it aggravated her allergies. The throw blankets my mother had crocheted were collecting dust and disappeared into a linen closet. My daily television programs were too loud during her yoga practice. David always sided with her. "Mom, it's not a big deal to move a few things around," or "Amanda is just trying to help modernize things a bit." The word modernize started to sound like a criticism of everything I held dear. I tried to be understanding. They were going through a stressful time, and Amanda was living in someone else's established home. I made compromises, giving them space and adjusting some of my habits to accommodate them. But the boundaries kept shifting, with Amanda claiming more territory every week. One Tuesday afternoon, I came home early from my book club meeting because of a rainstorm. The house was quiet, and I assumed no one was home. As I passed my small home office, something caught my eye. The drawer of my desk was slightly open. I distinctly remembered closing it that morning after paying my bills. Inside, my carefully organized financial documents were subtly out of order. My property tax statements, bank statements, and the folder containing information about my retirement accounts had clearly been handled. Nothing was missing, but the papers weren't how I had left them. Someone had been searching through my private financial information, and I had little doubt who it was. That night at dinner, Amanda asked casual questions about property values in the neighborhood and whether I had thought about downsizing now that you're getting older. The realization sent a chill through me. My daughter-in-law wasn't just making herself at home in my house. She was assessing its value. Over the following months, Amanda's presence in my home grew increasingly dominant. She no longer asked before making changes. She simply made them. The living room furniture was rearranged to create better flow. My antique side tables were replaced with sleek modern ones that brighten the space. My collection of family photos on the mantel was reduced to make room for abstract sculptures Amanda had purchased. Whenever I objected, she would say, "David and I thought this would be nice," effectively using my son as a shield against criticism. And David, who had always respected my home and my choices before his marriage, became increasingly distant. He would come home from job interviews or networking events and go straight to Amanda, speaking with her in hushed tones before approaching me with carefully rehearsed conversations. "Mom," he said one evening after a particularly tense dinner, where Amanda had criticized my cooking, "some of your methods are a bit traditional. There are easier, more modern ways to do things now." Traditional. The word hung in the air like an accusation. At 68, I was suddenly being treated as though my lifetime of experience was a liability rather than an asset. My garden became another battleground. The roses I had tenderly cultivated for decades, the vegetable patch that provided fresh produce all summer, the flowering shrubs that marked the seasons with their blooms were all, according to Amanda, too labor-intensive and not worth the water bill. "We should put in easy care landscaping," she announced one Saturday morning as I was preparing to spend a pleasant few hours weeding. "Rocks and native grasses. Low maintenance." The garden was my sanctuary, the place where I felt closest to Harold, who had built the raised beds with his own hands. The thought of seeing it converted to a sterile, rock-lined expanse made my stomach turn. "The garden stays as it is," I said firmly, perhaps the most direct I had been since they moved in. "This is still my home." Amanda's eyes narrowed slightly, but she smiled and walked away without another word. That should have warned me. Another source of tension was Amanda's habit of inviting her friends over without notice. I would come downstairs to find 3 or 4 women I barely knew drinking wine in my living room, or gathered around my dining table with takeout containers spread across the surface. They would fall silent when I entered, exchanging glances as Amanda introduced me as David's mom, rather than by my name. When my sister Eleanor called to tell me she needed surgery for her gallbladder, it felt like a reprieve to have a reason to leave the increasingly tense atmosphere of my home. Eleanor lived about 3 hours away, and I planned to stay with her for the weekend to help her prepare for the procedure scheduled for Monday. "I'll be back on Sunday evening," I told David and Amanda over breakfast. "The garden needs watering every evening if it doesn't rain, and please remember to bring in the mail." Amanda nodded absently, scrolling through her phone. "Don't worry about a thing, Sonia. We'll take care of everything." Something in her tone made me uneasy, but I dismissed it as paranoia. I packed a small suitcase, enough for 3 days, and drove to Eleanor's house with a sense of relief at having some breathing space. Eleanor's surgery was more complicated than expected. What should have been a routine procedure revealed additional issues that required a longer hospital stay and more extensive care during recovery. I called David to explain that I needed to stay longer. "Take all the time you need, Mom," he said, sounding distracted. "Everything's fine here." A week later, when Eleanor was stable enough to be left with a home health aide for a few hours, I drove home, exhausted but looking forward to sleeping in my own bed. The house looked different somehow as I pulled into the driveway. New curtains hung in the front window. The potted plants that had flanked my front door were gone. Inside, the changes were even more dramatic. New artwork on the walls, new throw pillows on the sofa. The dining table where my family had gathered for holidays for 4 decades had been replaced with a glass and metal monstrosity that matched nothing else in the house. "Welcome back," Amanda said brightly, emerging from the kitchen. "We've made a few improvements while you were away." Before I could respond, she took my arm in a gesture that felt controlling rather than supportive. "Let me show you to your room. We had to make some changes to the sleeping arrangements." She led me not to the master bedroom where I had slept for 43 years, but to the small guest room at the end of the hall. My clothes had been moved to the closet and dresser. My personal items were arranged neatly on the nightstand. The bed was made with unfamiliar new linens. "Where are my things? My bedroom furniture?" I asked, my voice sounding strange even to my own ears. "Oh, We moved the bedroom set to storage in the basement, Amanda said casually. David and I needed more space, so we took over the master. I hope you don't mind. This room is much more manageable for someone your age anyway. No attached bathroom to clean, less square footage to maintain. I stood in the doorway of the tiny guest room, staring at the unfamiliar space that was supposed to be mine now. My husband and I had chosen every piece of the bedroom set together when we were newlyweds. The mattress where I had slept since Harold died, still holding the impression of his body on his side, was gone. In its place was this sparse, impersonal space that felt nothing like home. You had no right, I said, my voice shaking. No right at all. Amanda's smile never faltered. David agreed it was for the best. You were gone. We needed to make decisions. You'll get used to it. As the reality of what they had done in my absence sank in, I realized this was no longer about making space in my home. This was a coup. I want my bedroom back. Now. The words came out stronger than I expected, given how my hands were shaking. Amanda's smile tightened. Let's wait for David to get home. I'm sure we can work this out like adults. When David arrived an hour later, I was still sitting rigidly on the edge of the guest bed, surrounded by belongings that had been moved without my permission. The confrontation was immediate and heated. How could you? I demanded. That bedroom has been mine for over 40 years. You had no right to move my things, to take over my space while I was away caring for my sister. David looked uncomfortable but stood next to Amanda, their united front clear. Mom, it's just temporary, until we can afford our own place. The master bedroom makes more sense for two people than one. Two people who are guests in my home, I reminded him. I welcomed you both here to help you through a difficult time, not to have you take over. Amanda stepped forward, her tone condescending. Sonia, at your age, maintaining a large bedroom is unnecessary stress. The smaller room is much more appropriate for your needs now. We're thinking of your well-being. My well-being? I nearly choked on the words. You think removing me from my own bedroom without my knowledge or consent is for my well-being? Mom, you're overreacting, David said in the placating tone one might use with a child. It's just furniture, just rooms. Why does it matter so much? I looked at my son, really looked at him, and barely recognized the man standing before me. The David I raised had been considerate and fair. This person, this stranger defending his wife's outrageous behavior, bore little resemblance to my son. That night, I called my younger son Michael in Arizona. Unlike David, who had always been sensitive and eager to please, Michael had a more pragmatic personality and a strong sense of justice. They did what? His outrage was validating after David's dismissal of my feelings. Mom, that's your house. Your name is on the deed. You have every legal right to decide who sleeps where. I know that intellectually, I admitted. But practically speaking, they've established themselves. David refuses to see anything wrong with what they've done. When I try to assert myself, Amanda turns it around to make it seem like I'm being unreasonable or senile. That's gaslighting, Michael said flatly. And it's a form of elder abuse, Mom. You need to stand your ground. It's your house, your rules. The next morning, bolstered by Michael's support, I announced at breakfast that I would be moving back into the master bedroom that day and expected my furniture to be brought up from the basement. The reaction was swift and ugly. Amanda burst into tears, claiming I was trying to make her feel unwelcome. David grew angry, accusing me of being inflexible and inconsiderate of their needs as a couple. We're family, he said, his voice raised. Family helps each other. You're being selfish. Family doesn't take advantage, I countered. Family doesn't make unilateral decisions about someone else's home. Family respects boundaries. But my words fell on deaf ears. David comforted his sobbing wife while shooting accusatory glances my way. The battle lines were drawn, and my own son had chosen his side. The atmosphere in the house grew increasingly hostile. Conversations ceased when I entered a room. Doors closed firmly when I walked past. Meals became tense affairs with minimal communication. I felt like a stranger in my own home, an unwelcome intruder rather than the homeowner. One afternoon, My neighbor Patricia came over with some fresh tomatoes from her garden. While Amanda was upstairs, Patricia lowered her voice and asked with genuine concern, "Sonia, are you doing all right? I've been worried since Amanda mentioned your memory problems." I stared at her, confused. My memory problems? Patricia looked uncomfortable. She told several of us at the neighborhood association meeting that you've been showing signs of dementia. Said you get confused about where things belong in the house, that you sometimes forget conversations you've had. She was asking about assisted living facilities in the area. Said they were researching options because the house is becoming too much for you to manage. The blood drained from my face. I had no memory issues whatsoever. My annual physical just 2 months earlier had included a cognitive assessment, which I had passed with flying colors. My doctor had even commented on how sharp I remained. "Patricia," I said carefully, "I am perfectly sound mentally. Amanda has been systematically trying to take over my home since she moved in. Now I understand she's trying to convince the neighborhood I'm incompetent." The realization was chilling. This wasn't just about comfort or convenience anymore. Amanda was laying groundwork, creating a narrative that could potentially be used to challenge my autonomy and my right to my own property. As Patricia left, promising to correct the record with our neighbors, I felt a cold certainty settle over me. The situation had become dangerous. I needed to protect myself. The day after learning about Amanda's lies to my neighbors, I drove to visit my old friend Judith, who had worked as a legal secretary at a law firm for 30 years before retiring. Though not a lawyer herself, she understood the legal system and would know what rights I had. "The house is fully in your name?" Judith confirmed as we sat at her kitchen table. "Yes. Harold and I paid off the mortgage 15 years ago. After he died, I had the deed transferred solely to my name." "And there's no written rental agreement with David and Amanda?" "Nothing formal. It was supposed to be a temporary arrangement to help them through a rough patch." Judith nodded thoughtfully. "Then legally, they're tenants at will. You have every right to establish rules for your home, including which bedroom they use. If they refuse to comply, you could technically evict them with proper notice." The word evict made my stomach turn. How had it come to this? Considering legal action against my own son? "There's something else," Judith added carefully. "Given what your neighbor told you about Amanda spreading rumors about your mental capacity, you might want to consult with an elder law attorney. These situations can escalate, and you want to make sure your rights and assets are protected." When I returned home that afternoon, the house was empty. In the kitchen, I noticed a stack of mail that had been opened despite being addressed to me. On top was a colorful brochure for Sunny Pines Retirement Community, with notes in Amanda's handwriting marking certain pricing plans. I began searching through drawers, looking for any evidence of other plans being made without my knowledge. In Amanda's desk in the corner of the living room, I found a folder containing more brochures for senior living facilities, printouts of local real estate listings, and notes about property values in my neighborhood. With growing horror, I realized she had been researching how much my house might sell for. When David came home alone that evening, I confronted him with the evidence. "What is all this?" I demanded, spreading the brochures and listings on the kitchen table. "Is Amanda planning to ship me off to a nursing home and sell my house?" David looked genuinely shocked, then embarrassed. He sat heavily at the table, running his hands through his hair in a gesture that reminded me painfully of when he was a troubled teenager. "Mom, it's complicated," he finally said. "Amanda thinks she believes it would be better for everyone if you downsized. The maintenance on this house, the property taxes, the utilities, it's a lot for someone your age to manage alone." "I'm not alone," I pointed out. "I have you and Amanda living here, rent-free, using my utilities, eating food I buy." David had the grace to look ashamed. "She wants us to have our own place, but we can't afford anything in this area, she thinks." He hesitated. "What, David? What does Amanda think?" He stared at his hands. "She thinks you should sign the house over to us. That we could take care of you. Maybe build an in-law suite eventually. But for now, she found some nice assisted living places that she thinks would be perfect for you." I felt as though I'd been slapped. This is my home. I have no intention of leaving it until they carry me out feet first, just like your father. I know, Mom, but Amanda says. I don't care what Amanda says. My voice rose sharply. This is my house. I worked my entire life to pay for it, to maintain it. Your father and I sacrificed to provide this stable home for you and Michael. And now some woman who's been in our family for 3 years thinks she can push me out and take everything I've built? It's not like that, David protested weakly. But we both knew it was exactly like that. When Amanda came home and found us at the table with her research materials spread out, she flew into a rage that stripped away any pretense of concern for my welfare. You went through my private things? She shrieked. How dare you? How dare I? How dare you plan to ship me off to a retirement home and take my house? I shot back. You're being selfish and short-sighted. Amanda's face was flushed with anger. This house is too big for you. It's wasted on one person. David and I could start a family here. Build a future. You've had your life. Amanda. David looked shocked at her outburst. No, I'm tired of tiptoeing around this, she continued, turning on him now. You promised you'd talk to her. You promised you'd convince her that this was the right thing to do. But you're too weak to stand up to her. As they argued, the truth became painfully clear. Amanda had been pressuring David to convince me to sign over my home, and he had been torn between his wife's demands and his obligation to me. Their entire temporary stay had been Amanda's strategy to gradually take over, creating a situation where I would feel pressured to leave my own house. That night, I made a decision. I needed space to think clearly, away from the toxic atmosphere that had taken over my home. I called Eleanor, now recovering well, and asked if I could visit again for a few days. The next morning, I informed David and Amanda of my plans. I'll be at Eleanor's for 3 days, I said firmly. When I return, I expect my bedroom furniture to be moved back to the master bedroom. I've been more than generous allowing you both to stay here, but things need to change if this arrangement is going to continue. Amanda's expression was unreadable, but she nodded silently. David looked relieved that I was leaving, which broke my heart a little more. I packed carefully for 3 days, making sure to take important documents with me this time. As I pulled out of the driveway, I saw the curtain in the living room fall back into place. Someone had been watching me leave. Eleanor was doing much better, and our visit turned out to be more pleasant than expected. On the second evening, she suggested we go to dinner at her favorite restaurant to get her out of the house for the first time since her surgery. Afterward, feeling optimistic about reclaiming my home when I returned, I decided to drive back a day early. It was nearly 9 at night when I pulled into my driveway. The house was brightly lit, and David's car was parked on the street. I retrieved my suitcase and approached the front door, feeling determined and ready to establish new boundaries. My key didn't work. I tried again, jiggling it in the lock as I had done thousands of times before. Nothing. Examining the door more closely, I realized with a shock that the entire lock had been replaced with a new deadbolt. I rang the doorbell, then knocked firmly. Through the curtains covering the small window in the door, I could see movement inside. Someone approached, peered out, then stepped back quickly. Amanda? David? Open the door! I called, knocking again more insistently. The curtain moved again, and I saw Amanda's face peering out. Our eyes met, and her expression was triumphant. She made no move to open the door. I called David's cell phone repeatedly. No answer. I tried the back door. New lock there, too. I even tried the windows, but they were all securely fastened. As the reality sank in, I felt a wave of disbelief wash over me. My son and his wife had changed the locks on my home while I was away. They had locked me out of my own house. Through the window, I could see Amanda speaking on her phone, gesturing animatedly. When she saw me watching, she walked deliberately to the window and closed the blinds with a snap. A text message finally came through from David. Mom, Amanda and I have decided this is what's best for everyone. We can talk tomorrow when things are calmer. Standing on my own porch with my suitcase at my feet, unable to enter the home I had owned and lived in for decades, I felt a surge of emotions. Shock, betrayal, heartbreak, and beneath it all, a slow, burning anger that would fuel what came next. I spent that night at Judith's house, crying intermittently as I recounted what had happened. To her credit, Judith didn't offer empty reassurances or tell me it would all work out. Instead, she listened, made notes, and occasionally made phone calls to people she knew from her years working at the law firm. "This is elder abuse, pure and simple," she said finally. "And it's illegal. They cannot lock you out of your own home." I tried calling David repeatedly the next morning. When he finally answered, his voice sounded wooden, rehearsed. "Mom, Amanda and I think it's best if you stay with Aunt Eleanor for a while longer. We need to sort some things out here. The stress of all this conflict isn't good for anyone." "David, you changed the locks on my house. My house. Do you understand what you've done is illegal? We're just trying to de-escalate the situation," he responded, clearly repeating phrases someone else had given him. "You've been increasingly difficult to live with, forgetting conversations we've had, moving things around and then blaming us." I recognized Amanda's narrative being fed through my son's mouth. "None of that is true, and you know it. I want you to let me into my home immediately. We can talk in a few days when everyone is calmer," he repeated, then hung up. Later that afternoon, my neighbor Patricia called me. "Sonia, I thought you should know. Amanda told everyone you decided to move in with your sister permanently. She said you realized the house was too much for you to handle and that you asked them to take over." A fresh wave of anger washed over me. "That's completely false, Patricia. They changed the locks while I was away and are refusing to let me back into my own home." Patricia gasped. "That's terrible. And there's something else you should know. She's already contacted a landscaping company about removing your garden. I saw them measuring the area yesterday. She was talking about putting in a hot tub. My garden. The roses Harold had planted for our 20th anniversary. The peony bushes that had come from my mother's garden. The careful arrangements of perennials that bloomed in sequence from early spring through late fall. The thought of it all being destroyed made my chest physically ache. With Judith's help, I began researching my legal rights and gathering documentation. The deed to the house was safely in my possession, thankfully. I had property tax statements showing my name as the owner. Utility bills were all in my name as well. I called Michael, who was outraged and immediately booked a flight. "I'll be there tomorrow, Mom. We're going to fix this." While waiting for Michael to arrive, I tried to engage a locksmith to help me regain access to my home. The first one I called was sympathetic, but refused when I explained the situation. "I can't get involved in domestic disputes, ma'am. You'd need to show proof of ownership and possibly have police present." That evening, scrolling through social media to distract myself, I was shocked to see photos posted by Amanda. She was hosting what she called a house rewarming party, showing off our newly renovated home. The photos revealed further changes to my house, additional furniture I'd never seen, a new entertainment system, my heirloom china cabinet, nowhere in sight. In one photo, Amanda stood in my kitchen, champagne glass raised, with a caption that read, "New beginnings in our first home." The comments were filled with congratulations. Several mentioned how generous I had been to gift them the house since I preferred living with my sister. The fictional narrative Amanda had created was spreading unchecked. Judith helped me connect with neighbors who had witnessed the situation unfold. Several agreed to provide statements about Amanda's false claims regarding my mental state and about seeing me being denied entry to my own home. The next day, Michael arrived, bringing his characteristic energy and determination. He had already been in contact with a lawyer friend specializing in elder law. "This is more common than you'd think, Mom," he said grimly as we sat at Judith's kitchen table. "Financial elder abuse often starts with family members who feel entitled to assets before the owner is ready to relinquish them." As we discussed strategy, I received an automated alert from my bank about unusual credit card activity. Logging into my account, I discovered multiple large charges at furniture stores, home decor retailers, and a landscaping company, all made in the past 3 days. While I had been locked out of my home, the total exceeded $4,000. "She's using my credit card to redecorate my house that she's locked me out of," I said in disbelief, showing Michael the transactions. His expression hardened. That's fraud. We're calling the police right now. The officer who took my report was professional but cautious. These situations can be complicated when family is involved, he explained. But unauthorized use of your credit card is clearly illegal. As for the property dispute, that may require civil rather than criminal proceedings. He suggested we request a civil standby, a police officer who would accompany me to the property to help maintain peace while I attempted to regain entry. Over the next 24 hours, Michael and I assembled all the necessary documentation and coordinated with Judith's colleague, a semi-retired attorney named Frank, who specialized in elder law. We arranged for a locksmith who was willing to change the locks back with proper documentation and police presence. Everything was set for the following morning. That night, I barely slept, torn between anxiety about the confrontation to come and relief that action was finally being taken. I thought of Harold, of how devastated he would be to see our son behave this way. But I also knew he would be proud of me for standing up for myself, for refusing to be victimized even by family. As dawn broke, I felt a sense of resolve strengthen within me. This was my home, my life, and I would not be pushed aside or manipulated out of what was rightfully mine. Today, Amanda would learn that she had severely underestimated the woman whose home she had tried to steal. We arrived at my house at precisely 10 o'clock in the morning. Our small convoy consisted of my car with Michael driving, Frank's sedan, the locksmith's van, and a police cruiser. The officer, a woman named Sergeant Taylor, had been briefed on the situation and carried copies of my documentation establishing ownership. As we pulled up to the curb, I saw the living room curtain twitch. Someone had seen us arrive. Good. I wanted them to see what was coming. Michael helped me from the car, and we approached the front door together, followed by Frank and Sergeant Taylor. The locksmith waited by his van for the officer's signal. I rang the doorbell and knocked firmly. After a moment, Amanda opened the door just wide enough to see us, security chain still in place. Her eyes widened at the sight of our group. "What is this?" she demanded, her voice higher than usual. "Amanda," I said calmly, "I've come to enter my home. Please remove the chain and open the door completely." "David isn't here," she said quickly. "I can't make these kinds of decisions without him." Sergeant Taylor stepped forward. "Ma'am, I'm Officer Taylor with the police department. I'm here for a civil standby to ensure Mrs. Marshall can peacefully re-enter her property. I have documentation confirming her ownership of this residence." Amanda's face flushed. "This is ridiculous. We live here." She agreed to let us have the house. "That is patently false," Frank interjected. "Mrs. Marshall has made no such agreement. In fact, we have documented evidence of her repeated attempts to regain access to her property after you illegally changed the locks in her absence. You can't just barge in here. This is our home now." Amanda's voice had taken on a shrill quality. "Mrs. Parker," Sergeant Taylor continued professionally, "I need you to remove the security chain and allow us entry. Otherwise, you could be charged with trespassing and unlawful exclusion of the property owner." Amanda's eyes darted between us, clearly searching for a way out of the situation. "I need to call David," she insisted. "Go ahead," I replied. "But we're coming in one way or another." While Amanda made her call, Sergeant Taylor nodded to the locksmith, who approached with his tools. Seeing this, Amanda quickly removed the chain, perhaps realizing that resistance would only make things worse. As we entered, I was shocked by the extent of the changes. More of my furniture had been removed or replaced. The walls had been repainted in colors I would never have chosen. Family photos had been taken down, replaced with generic artwork. Amanda stood in the middle of the living room, phone pressed to her ear, speaking rapidly. "David, you need to come home now. Your mother is here with police and some lawyer. They're saying she still owns the house. What do I tell them about our plan?" Frank went immediately to the kitchen table and spread out our documentation. "Mrs. Parker, I suggest you review these papers while we wait for your husband. This deed clearly shows Sonia Marshall as the sole owner of this property. These property tax statements confirm that fact. And these credit card statements show unauthorized charges made by you while Mrs. Marshall was illegally denied access to her home. Amanda's face paled as she stared at the evidence before her. Outside, we heard the locksmith beginning to work on the front door. "What's he doing?" Amanda demanded. "Changing the locks back," Michael explained coldly. "The locks that never should have been changed in the first place." 20 minutes later, David arrived, bursting through the door looking flustered and confused. "Mom? Michael? What's going on?" "Your wife locked Mom out of her own house," Michael said before I could answer. "Changed the locks while she was away, refused to let her in, then started using Mom's credit card to buy new furniture. That's what's going on." David looked at Amanda in shock. "You used Mom's credit card? You told me she gave you permission to use it for groceries." Amanda's composure finally cracked. "What was I supposed to do? You lost your job. We were living in her house like children, having to ask permission for every little thing. This was our chance to finally have something of our own. By stealing from my mother?" David looked genuinely horrified. "She doesn't need this big house. She doesn't need the money. She's just being selfish, holding on to everything while we struggle." Amanda was shouting now, tears streaming down her face. I stepped forward, meeting my daughter-in-law's gaze directly. "Amanda, I welcomed you into my home. I tried to help you and my son through a difficult time, and you repaid that generosity by lying about me, trying to steal my property, and excluding me from my own home. That ends today." Sergeant Taylor, who had been observing the exchange with professional detachment, spoke up. "Mr. Parker, Mrs. Parker, I should inform you that changing locks to exclude a property owner is illegal. Using someone else's credit card without authorization constitutes fraud." Mrs. Marshall would be well within her rights to press charges. Amanda collapsed onto the sofa, sobbing dramatically. David stood frozen, looking back and forth between his wife and his mother, as if seeing us both clearly for the first time. "Mom, I'm so sorry," he finally said, his voice breaking. "I didn't know about the credit card. I swear. And the locks. She told me you had agreed to stay with Aunt Eleanor while we sorted things out." I studied my son's face, searching for the boy I had raised. He looked lost, diminished somehow. "David, how could you believe that I would agree to be locked out of my own home?" "I don't know," he admitted, sinking into a chair. "Everything got so confused. Amanda kept saying you were becoming forgetful, that you'd agreed to things and then changed your mind. She said it would be better for everyone if we had a cooling-off period. And you believed that? Without even speaking to me directly?" He couldn't meet my eyes. I wanted to believe it. Things were so tense, and Amanda was so unhappy. She kept saying that if we didn't resolve the housing situation, our marriage might not survive. Amanda's sobbing suddenly stopped. She sat up, her tear-stained face transformed by anger. "This is all your fault!" she shouted at David. "You promised we'd have our own place. You promised your mother would help us. I've got $15,000 in credit card debt from before we were married, and you said we'd pay it off with your new job, but then you lost it. What was I supposed to do?" The room fell silent as her words hung in the air. $15,000 in hidden debt. The real reason behind her desperate push to take over my house was finally clear. David stared at his wife in shock. $15,000? You told me it was $3,000 when we got married. I lied, okay? I couldn't tell you the truth because you would have freaked out. And now we're stuck in your mother's house with no way out because you can't find a decent job. Amanda's voice had taken on a hysterical edge. "So you thought the solution was to steal my house and sell it to pay off your shopping debts?" I asked incredulously. Amanda turned on me, her mask completely gone now. "You don't need it. You're just one old woman. David and I could start a family here. We could have sold it and bought something smaller for all of us. It would have worked out for everyone, except for the part where it's my house and my decision," I said firmly. "And after what you've done, I've made that decision. David can stay temporarily while he figures out his next steps. But you, Amanda, need to leave. Today. You can't throw me out. I have rights. Frank cleared his throat. Actually, Mrs. Parker, you have established no tenancy rights that would require formal eviction. You've been staying here at Mrs. Marshall's invitation with no lease or rental agreement. Given the documented fraud and the illegal lockout, Mrs. Marshall is well within her rights to demand your immediate departure. Amanda looked around wildly, seeking an ally. Finding none, she turned to David. Are you going to let her do this to me? To us? David looked torn, broken, but something in his face had changed, hardened. Amanda, you lied to me. You manipulated me into turning against my own mother. You tried to steal her house. And now I find out you've been hiding massive debt from me our entire marriage? So you're choosing her over me? Amanda's voice was venomous. No, David said quietly. I'm choosing honesty over lies. I'm choosing right over wrong. And what you've done is wrong. For the next 2 hours, Michael and I supervised as Amanda packed her personal belongings. David moved between helping her and apologizing to me repeatedly. The new locks were installed, and I had the only keys. Sergeant Taylor remained until Amanda had loaded her car with what she could fit, with David promising to store the rest of her things until she found a place. As the sun began to set, Amanda drove away, and I stepped back into my home, officially mine again, secured against those who would take it from me. The house was a mess, changed in ways that made it feel foreign, but it was mine. And as I looked at David's devastated face, I knew there was still much healing to be done before it would feel like home again. That night, after Michael helped me move my bedroom furniture back upstairs from the basement, David and I sat at the kitchen table for a long, painful conversation. I can stay at a hotel, he offered, his eyes red from crying. I understand if you want me gone too. You're my son, I said simply. You made terrible mistakes, but you're still my son. You can stay here temporarily, but things will be different now. We established clear rules and boundaries. David would contribute to household expenses while he continued his job search. He would help restore the house to its previous condition as much as possible. And he would seek counseling to understand how he had allowed himself to be manipulated into turning against his own mother. The next morning, Amanda returned, expecting to continue moving her things. She was shocked to find all her remaining belongings already packed and waiting on the front lawn. You can't just throw my things outside, she protested as she got out of her car. Actually, I can, I replied calmly from the porch. Everything that belongs to you is there. Anything you don't take today will be donated. She looked past me, searching for David. Where is he? Is he just going to let you do this? This isn't David's decision. It's mine. This is my house, and you are no longer welcome in it. Amanda's face contorted with anger. This isn't over. I'm going to tell everyone what a bitter, selfish old woman you are. Go ahead, I replied, unmoved. The neighbors already know the truth. So does the police department. So will the credit card company that's investigating the fraud charges. Tell whatever story you want, Amanda. It won't change the facts. She stared at me for a long moment, perhaps seeing for the first time that I wasn't the feeble, manipulable old woman she had imagined me to be. Without another word, she began loading her possessions into her car, avoiding my gaze. David watched from an upstairs window, his expression a mixture of grief and relief. I knew he was mourning not just the end of his marriage, but the loss of the person he thought Amanda was. The woman he had married existed only in his imagination, constructed from Amanda's careful performance and his own desire to believe in her. Over the following weeks and months, our family began the slow process of healing. David entered therapy and began to understand how Amanda's manipulation had played on his insecurities and his desire to please others. He found a new job, not as prestigious as his previous position, but stable and with growth potential. Michael returned to Arizona but called more frequently, his awareness of our family's vulnerability heightened by the crisis we had weathered. I met with an estate attorney and created a comprehensive plan to protect my assets and ensure my wishes would be respected regardless of future circumstances. The house would eventually be divided equally between my sons, but only after my death. Until then, it remained firmly in my control. The credit card company reversed the fraudulent charges after investigating the matter. Amanda eventually agreed to a payment plan to avoid legal charges being filed. 6 months after the lockout incident, the house was mostly restored to my preferences. David had helped repaint the walls in my chosen colors. The furniture that had been put in storage was returned to its rightful place. My garden, which Amanda had not had time to destroy, bloomed again with renewed vigor, as if celebrating our victory. For Thanksgiving that year, Michael flew in with his family. It was the first holiday we had all spent together in several years. David, now living in an apartment across town, came early to help me prepare the meal. As we gathered around my dining table, the one that had been in the family for generations, returned from where Amanda had stored it in the garage, I looked at my sons and grandchildren and felt a profound sense of gratitude. "Before we eat," I said, raising my glass, "I want to toast to family. Real family. The kind that makes mistakes and forgives. The kind that learns and grows. The kind that stands by each other when it truly matters." David's eyes filled with tears as he raised his glass. "To Mom," he added quietly, "who taught us what real strength looks like." Later, as we cleaned up after dinner, David paused beside me at the sink. "I don't think I've properly apologized for everything that happened," he said. "Not really. You've been apologizing for months," I replied, handing him a plate to dry. "No, I've been saying I'm sorry, but I haven't acknowledged the full extent of what I did," he insisted. "I betrayed you, Mom. I let someone come between us and almost destroy our relationship. I failed to protect you when that was my responsibility as your son, and I'm truly, deeply sorry." I turned to look at my son, seeing both the boy he had been and the man he was becoming. "I forgive you, David. We all make mistakes. The question is whether we learn from them." "I have," he assured me. "I'll never take family for granted again, and I'll never let anyone come between us." As spring arrived the following year, I spent more and more time in my garden. One warm Saturday, I was planting new rose bushes when a car slowed in front of the house. Amanda sat behind the wheel, looking at the home she had tried to claim as her own. Our eyes met briefly across the lawn. Then she drove away without stopping. I returned to my planting, pressing the roots of a new piece rose into the soil Harold had enriched decades ago. Like this garden, I had endured. I had been threatened but not uprooted. I had weathered the storm and emerged stronger. The most important lesson I learned through this painful experience was that maintaining your boundaries is not selfish, it's essential. Being generous doesn't mean allowing yourself to be exploited. Being a loving mother doesn't mean enabling destructive behavior. And being older doesn't mean surrendering your autonomy or your voice. Sometimes the greatest act of love is standing firm, saying no, and requiring others to respect your rights and your dignity. I had taught my sons this lesson years ago, but I needed to relearn it myself. No matter your age, no matter who is challenging you, you have the right to protect what's yours and to demand respect. As I patted the soil around my new rosebush, I felt a sense of peace that had been missing during those turbulent months. My home was truly mine again. My family was healing, and I had discovered a resilience within myself that I hadn't known I possessed. Life will always bring challenges, sometimes from the most unexpected sources. The question isn't whether difficulties will come, but how we'll respond when they do. Will we allow others to diminish us, to push us aside, to take what is rightfully ours? Or will we stand our ground, assert our worth, and fight for what matters? I chose to fight, and in doing so, I not only reclaimed my home but also rediscovered my voice and my power. That is a lesson worth learning at any age. Have you ever had to stand your ground with family members who crossed important boundaries? How did you handle the situation? I'd love to hear your experiences in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share it with someone who might need encouragement to stand up for themselves. Thank you for listening to my story, and I wish you the strength to protect what matters most to you in your own life.